welcome to today's episode of the For the Joy Missionary Show. I'm so happy that you're here with me today. I'm, of course, your host, Jill Simons, and I have a very lovely guest to talk with me today. She's someone that I had the great privilege of spending some time with in person, finally, in the post-COVID days that we find ourselves entering into. We had the pleasure of going on a retreat together, and it was such a joy to get to know her, and I know you will enjoy chatting with her just as much as I have. So I would like to welcome Shalini Blubaugh. She is a business owner and a coach, and she is really exploring how to live her day-to-day life with greater joy, as all of us are. And we're going to be talking today about finding joy in the midst of things that just look different than what you expected joy to look like. So Shalini, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so just humbled to be here with you. Thanks for inviting me.
So why don't you introduce yourself for people listening to you, hearing about you for the first time on the show?
Sure. My name is Shalini. Like Jill mentioned, you can call me Shawl for sure, like a shawl you wrap around your neck. It's much easier to remember than Shalini. I am a wife to Matt. I am a mom to, we call her gal pal Callan. She's 2.5 years old. She's here on earth with us. We have a little baby in heaven as well. I have Zyia Active Independent Rep business. I work for an activewear athleisure wear company, and I do that full time from my house. I am also a certified personal trainer, and I'm just starting to build that business. So kind of in the business world, in the mom life world, in the wife life world. We're in Denver, Colorado, and life is really, really sweet and blessed.
That is awesome. So exciting. And so everybody needs to celebrate Shalini's personal training certification because it just happened earlier this summer and it is super exciting.
Yes. It's one of those things where I'm like, thank you, Jesus. We finally arrived. But now I'm like, oh, no, we haven't. Now it's like the lifting part of things. So
yes.
So excited to see what comes in. Thanks for the love.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to see what you build. It's going to be beautiful. So in your life, Shalini, you have shared part of your personal story with me, which is just really beautiful. Constant changes in plans. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that with everybody listening and how you have really been led by joy throughout that journey.
Yeah. Where to even begin? So joy has been such a pivotal virtue in my own life. I think joy sometimes has just kind of followed me around, and even in those really difficult, hard seasons of life where I have not necessarily like felt the joy, I've always kind of known like joy is here, waiting, because with the Lord, right? Joy exists. So a little bit of my backstory is simply that I actually have my law degree. I went to law school. A little bit further backstory is that my parents were born and raised in India, came to the United States in the late 80s, and really had this vision of a future for their children. And so with that said, like my dad started working at Burger King. That was his first job. And kind of like, if you can think about like the quote unquote American dream, that's like what my parents did.
Yeah.
So within Indian culture, it was never necessarily spoken out loud, but within our culture, I was going to be one of three things. I was going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And so, again, it was never necessarily spoken, but they worked so hard to make this beautiful life for their future kiddos. And so with that said, I entered law school in 2014. And after my first semester of my first year of law school, I went home to my parents' house and I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going back. And my dad was like, yes, you are. And within that time, I was really struggling with this tension of, I know this is not where I'm supposed to be. I know that I desire to be certified as a personal trainer. I want to work in the arena of all things health and fitness. I want to champion other women on their health and fitness journeys, but that just wasn't within the scope of my parents' vision. And so I went back to law school. I finished in 2017. I graduated with my degree. And I will always be thankful for that time, specifically because it's where I met my husband, Matt. I met in my second year of law school, his third. In my life, we wouldn't have our sweet babies. We wouldn't, it would be so different had I not gone back. And just kind of said, okay, to my dad when he said, yeah, you are going back. But upon graduation, I knew 110% I never wanted to practice law. And I told my parents, and I told Matt at that point, we knew we were going to get married. I told them, I'm only taking the bar exam once. The bar exam is what you need to pass in order to practice law. I'm only taking it once. Whether I pass, I'm not practicing law. Whether I fail, I'm not practicing law. And I took the exam. I failed it. And it was one of the most heart-wrenching, but also freeing days of my life, because it really gave me an opportunity to look at joy and say, right, in so many areas of our lives, I think especially as us as women can want to make other people feel joy or feel happy or satisfied or meet expectations when we sacrifice our own joy or the path that the Lord is actually directing us towards. And so failing the bar exam for me was really this one door shutting, like slamming shut, but also simultaneously one door opening wide in order for me to pursue health and fitness. So that's a bit of backstory in how all of these puzzle pieces are still coming together, but a big chunk of it.
Your story and mine are so similar because for me, it was the question of, was I going to get my master's degree? Because I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2011 and had done a program abroad that was really like, I was going to be a writing MFA candidate. And I did a program abroad that was really like, can you handle the workload of an MFA? And did well in that program. But really what was shared with me is that if I wasn't willing to compromise on, subject matter and just how intense on a lot of fronts, use your imagination or don't, I wanted my writing to be that I wasn't going to be able to be competitive in a modern MFA program. And I walked away from that and was like, no, I think I can do this. I think I can do this. And so I applied to my MFA program. It's not my senior year of college because I was also getting married, but that first year after I was married, and got rejected by every single MFA program that I had applied to. And we're talking about, like, I was salutatorian of my graduating class at a, small academic town where there was steep competition, and I graduated summa cum laude from my bachelor's degree. And so it was just like all these things. Never before had I had like a stack. I mean, I think I applied 12 places. Never before I had a stack of rejection letters like that. And when you shared your story about not passing the bar, I was like, I know that feeling, because it was also clear to me that the secular MFA world was not where I was going to find joy in the long run, very similar to the secular law field, I feel like, for you. And there's that part of you, what it was for me, and I'd be interested for you to share if this was similar for you. What it was for me was that, like, oh my gosh, how do I not take this as a judgment on me? That I did not raise to these, in a lot of ways, arbitrary level that someone has decided it makes you, pass the bar or into this program or something like that. And that was the hardest part of it, was really managing, like, how am I still okay with myself after this?
Yeah, man. There's so much jam packed into that, right? Because how do we define our worth? Where is our dignity? Are those things movable and shakeable? No, right? But so often, I think, especially in the professional world, we can, and we're bred, right? And there's nothing wrong. Like, we go to kindergarten, then we go to first grade, second grade, so on and so forth. And we go and we get the degrees and the accolades and the summa cum laude, like, right? Yeah. Graduate high honors. Because I've been in that boat too. And it's so easy to let the ways of the world or the words of the world start to define us without even necessarily acknowledging like, oh, my worth is tied into this degree, my law degree. You know, who is Shalini? Oh, she's a law school graduate. She has a Juris Doctorate, right? When the reality is that joy has nothing to do with a degree. Joy has nothing to do with whether you're a high honor student or you failed classes, because I've also been there. You know, joy is so deeply tied to who the Lord created us to be. And I think if we live out of that place, joy can't be shaken. We will forever know our worth and our dignity is tied not to the ways of the world or the things that I do or don't do, but in the simple fact that I am a daughter of God, and I can find deep and abiding, unshakable joy in that. And so I feel you when you say, like, I was rejected, you know, I have never had a pile of rejections, and how that does shake us. I really do believe, like, within that and within my own, you know, not passing the bar exam was really an opportunity to say that the Lord used to say, like, Shal, where are you finding joy? Where are you placing your worth? And who are you allowing to define who you are? In your value and what you can, you know, share with the world.
So as you went through this time post bar exam where you had not had the, you know, it's funny because you had said you weren't going to practice law either way, but it's such a, like we talked about, you know, a thing that can have that internal effect. So what did you do to really fortify your self-worth in that time? Because I think so many people will say, you know, I'm a daughter of God, this inherent worth and stuff like that. And it stays a very, like, repetitive head thing, and there's very little connection to the core, kind of your emotional core, to be able to have that alter the way you feel about the event. And obviously feelings aren't everything, but it's not nothing. It's important to have that kind of feeling of peace as well. So share with us about how you kind of navigated that in your situation.
Yeah. I always told myself, Shalini, go where the peace is, because where the peace is, there is freedom in the Lord. There is the Lord right there, where the peace is. And so honestly, in a very practical way, Jill, coming out of that, right? Because I think you're absolutely right. It can almost sound like foo-foo, like, oh, we're daughters of God. And those things are so true. But what does it look like practically lived out? And I think that's, what you're saying, like, that's where the disconnect can be. But what I had to practically do in that time, set intentional time aside every single day to be in prayer, right? Because we know this, we're like sponges. Our hearts are like sponges, especially as women. I think we're like sponges. So if we're surrounded by this world that says, go, do, succeed, achieve, blah, 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 those things in and of themselves are not bad things. But when they're disconnected from a life of prayer and hearing the Lord's voice before the world's voice, right? That's kind of when things can start to get a little bit ugly. So instead of surrounding myself with, like, scrolling social media and to see all of my friends that had passed the bar exam, I am actually removing myself from those spaces, not to say not being joyful for them, but really focusing inward. And I put myself in a place of prayer, right? Because if we can surround ourselves and set intentional time aside to be with the Lord, we're going to start internalizing, oh my gosh, I am a daughter of God. Nothing actually outside of the fact that I'm a daughter of God adds to my value or devalue. And so practically speaking, I was in the adoration chapel a lot more than I had really truly ever been. I was at daily mass a ton more. And I should say too, I understand that at that season and in that time of life, we were newly married. I wasn't working yet. So I had the time to dedicate to the sacraments more so than I had ever before. But even in the season that I'm in right now with mom life and business owner life and another business owner life, the one thing that has stayed the same and that will never shake for me is setting aside intentional prayer time. Because I know that even still, years of working on where is my joy, how is my worth tied to the Lord, if I even spend a couple days away from an intentional prayer time, that begins to shake for me.
Yeah.
It does. It begins to shake.
Mm-hmm.
So coming out of that time, failing the bar exam, really understanding I'm a sponge.
Mm-hmm.
Where I spend my time is what I am going to focus on. And so I want to focus on the Lord. I want to focus on what he has next for me. I want to focus on hearing his voice and not the voices everywhere else. And so that's what that really meant for me, of realizing I'm not always going to want to feel like sitting down to spend time in prayer, but I know I need it, especially at that point in my life where so many pieces were just shaky.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to draw on your new personal trainer hat a little bit and talk about something that I think comes up for a lot of people is specifically this idea of how do I find joy in my body and in movement when it is something that I am like at war with, when it's something that I don't like it right now, and maybe moving is not something that is enjoyable for me. How can people start shifting that dialogue within themselves about themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will always say inaction breeds more inaction. So just start. And that's kind of square one, just start. And then the second kind of piece of that square is start with something you enjoy doing. I think so often, I talk to so many women that are like, I don't like to run. And I'm like, okay, so don't run. Or I don't like fill in the blank. Okay, so let's not start there. You don't have to start with something that you don't find to be enjoyable. In fact, I would say that's more of a detriment to your like health and fitness journey and its sustainability if you're starting in places that just feel really exhausting. So with that said, inaction breeds inaction, but action breeds confidence. So if you can start in a place, okay, I want to go for a 10-minute walk every single day or 3 days a week. Start small and set goals that are achievable for you, right? Those little action steps are going to breed confidence, and confidence compounds. It just does. So the more comfortable you're becoming with whatever it is you're doing, you're taking action on, the more confidence you're going to have in taking the next right step. So often I think as women, we're like, I'm right here and I'm hating on myself, but I want to be over here and I want to love myself. But we need to recognize that there are steps, lots of steps in between that are going to make those moves possible. And a lot of it is action breeds confidence. Just one small action step at a time, one small action step a day even is enough. And it doesn't have to be an hour. It can be 10 minutes between washing dishes and putting the baby to sleep,
And here's where I'm going to push you, because this is the kind of thing that I love to hear from people who really have expertise and passion in this area, because I think something that I've struggled with. So one thing I've struggled with my whole life is this narrative that I'm not an athlete. Like I am non-athletic. That's been like, I said it about myself. Every gym teacher I've ever had has said it about me. And it wasn't something that I took as like an insult. I was like, no, yeah, this is true. Like I am very little athletic prowess. And so now as an adult, trying to look at the fact that I would like to be active in my 80s and be present to my children and their their children, and be able to be someone that's active in the second half of my life. The thoughts around that are changing, obviously, and really realizing that it's a necessity, whether it's something that's natural to me or not. But in starting small, sometimes I find that it's really hard to sustain the effort without going to a place of like, how much do I dislike myself to kind of sustain that effort, because it's not a like quick results situation. So what is it that that people can do to kind of hold over that middle part when they have started, they're moving, but we're not seeing it on the scale yet. We're not seeing it in closed fit yet, but obviously it's effective to be started. And when there's that kind of motivation gap, almost, if you take out the piece of, to be honest, self-loathing that a lot of people include in their process towards greater health.
Yeah. So much could be said about all of that, right? Where do we even start? The one thing that I'm like so desiring to change the conversation within all of this is that so many of us women look at health and fitness or desire to change our bodies, our eating habits, whatever it is, our energy levels, out of a place of self-loathing. Out of a place of self-loathing. And that's the easy way to go, because our mind will naturally go to picking at ourselves, looking in the mirror and saying, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that, I don't like that, right? And so we're moving from this place, we're moving forward from this place of, I don't like this, so I'm going to do this to change this. Where if we can change the conversation before we even step foot in a gym, before we even put our tennis shoes on, before we even fill our water bottles up, if we can start from a place in our minds that says, I want to do this because I am able. You are able. I'm getting the chills even talking about this. It gets me so fired up. If we can change the conversation from, I am going to work out because I just ate a donut, to, I want to work out because I am able. Whatever able looks like for you. Right? Because it's going to be different for everybody else. If we can change that and internalize that mindset, and it's going to take time, because we are literally rewriting the brain pathways in our brains, in our minds, because we already know, again, going back to that, it's easy to sit in a place of self-loathing. It is more challenging to bring ourselves to look in the mirror and say, I am able, and this is why I'm going to show up. But when the conversation consistently becomes, every single time you look in the mirror and can say, I am going to show up because I am able, that is such a more beautiful place to begin from, and therefore more sustainable. I will say this forevermore until the day I die. If we're starting health and fitness journeys from places of hating ourselves into healthy living, it's counterproductive, right? We can't hate ourselves into health. We can't. But we can get into this healthier routine by starting in our minds. Our thoughts will lead to feelings. Our feelings will lead to inaction or action, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just changing that, even that, it's not even like the beginning of a health and fitness journey. It's like the pre health and fitness journey. Of recognizing I am able, and this is why I'm going to show up.
I love that. I love that. And then that obviously is the piece of the puzzle that leads us to having a health and fitness journey that can be defined by joy, as opposed to one that's like, how much can I suffer? Like, force myself to suffer today, which is something that I think we have talked even personally about the interplay between joy and suffering. And that's such a frequent theme on our podcast, is that there is absolutely space for those things to coexist. But then I think the health and fitness journey is such a good microcosm for how they show up together, because there's that difference between showing up by your able, and it's still a really hard workout maybe, and there's still, the muscle burn and things like that, but there's joy in that, as opposed to starting from a place of lack and worthlessness and then doing the same hard workout and just really taking it on as a punishment.
Yes. And that's another kind of piece. I think our health and fitness journeys will become more sustainable simply because we're enjoying them, right? And I'm not saying you enjoy them and it's like super easy peasy, kind of what you just mentioned, Jill. Joy and suffering are inseparable. We can look to the cross and see that. And it's so funny to me within all things health and wellness, like how so many of us kind of just like, yes, our faith is over here, but then like my health and fitness journey is over here. When the reality is, I'm like, there are so many parallels. There's so many parallels. Yeah. And so recognizing, right, I'm going to show up to this workout. It's probably going to hurt, not in like this detrimental hurt, but like my muscles are going to burn. I'm going to feel it. This is going to be uncomfortable. But what happens in our health and fitness journeys, when we lean into the burn, when we lean into the discomfort, we grow. And the same can be said for joy in our faith life. We wouldn't know joy if we didn't know suffering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always think that health and fitness is such a powerful place to start the dialogue with the secular culture, because we see so many people that are very disciplined and very careful about their approach to fitness, in the same way that we're really called to be intentional in our approach to the faith life. But then the same people, no one in particular, but kind of in general, the stereotype being then the person is the same person that will be very undisciplined in other areas of their lives that have such possibility to impact their joy by being able to know Christ, essentially. And I think that is a place where this analogy makes sense in our culture. We have this concept of suffering for when it comes to health and fitness, but there is such a disconnect of like the conversation about euthanasia, essentially, assisted suicide for those that are very, very ill, is obviously a very heated conversation. And there's that sense, we know as Christians that there's always the opportunity for redemption in that suffering, though it might be just very, very challenging to understand in the particular. We know that opportunity remains. Similarly to how we see the good that can come from suffering in this context. And so that's part of the reason I'm so excited for you to be in this space, because I know that this is going to be the kinds of conversations that you are starting.
Yes. Thanks, Jill. That truly, I couldn't agree more. We live in a culture that shies away from suffering. The euthanasia, right, example is a really fabulous example. That's not the right word. Do you know what I'm saying? It's a good example to understand how we talk about suffering in our culture, and people are like, no suffering. We will literally do anything to avoid suffering.
Yeah.
We will, we seek pleasure and happiness and comfort, and we're called to so much more. And so I couldn't agree more that there is kind of this bridge between health and fitness and faith, where people, right, it makes sense. You go to the gym, you lift heavy weights, it hurts a little bit, and then you grow and you get better. Yeah. And the same is in our faith life. But how do we talk about it in the sense, how do we bring people to Christ to really fully know authentic joy by chatting about this? I don't know what the Lord's going to do, but I think it's going to be something really beautiful.
Well, and I think that this is such a great personification also of just like what the mission is, what we, tell everyone listening that you are a missionary of joy. And that is so much what I see you doing right now, and many, many other women in this space. I think also of like the women at Reform Wellness and Victorious Health and all different, and many personal trainers and things like that are starting these conversations from health, from right where they are, from being the best in their field, which I also really think is so, so beautiful. People pursuing the excellence on kind of the, we're right up there with all the other personal trainers that you could go to, but there's this added huge benefit of having this context that you put it into.
Yes. Amen. Thank you, Jill.
Yeah.
Here it comes.
I cannot wait to see what happens. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today, Shalini. I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this beautiful ministry. It is such a joy.